It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Cotality data shows that Sydney's Milsons Point and Kirribilli fell 7.1% and 6.3% respectively, while Melbourne's Armidale and Carlton dropped up to 5.1%. Analysts say that unit density and affordability limits are key factors, with inner city markets lagging behind stronger growth seen in mid-tier capitals like Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide amid shifting migration and affordability pressures. Well, right now, let's take you off to Victoria and catch up with James Arnett from Bell Property in Armidale. And good morning to you, James. Welcome into the Real Estate Breakfast. Are you a Snoop Dogg or Viggo Mortensen fan?
Thank you very much. I think, like most people, saw Snoop Dogg at the AFL. It's probably my last engagement with either of them. We'll probably go with him, given the significance of the day.
Well, let's talk about your market because, as I just mentioned, a little bit of a dip and all sorts of reasons being talked about. One of the reasons is the fewer high-end homes being sold. They're saying that is skewing median values.
Absolutely. I probably challenge your point on fewer high-end homes. I think still the same volume of high-end homes are being sold, but I think there's more lower-end properties coming to market. There's significant changes over the last few years in Victoria surrounding investors, higher taxes, more onerous legislation, coupled with probably less growth than most people have anticipated, seen a significant sellout of investors. So there's been a lot more of the lower price point that's been transacting, which, yes, if you look at the statistics holistically, it probably does bring the median down, probably does bring the average price down. But I think there's probably a bit of context to that too.
Yes, we talked about the investors that have been selling out from last year. What's been happening over the last few months around those investors? Because my understanding is they're still wanting to bail.
They certainly are, and at the risk of boring you with some statistics, last financial year for our office, 64% of all properties we sold were investors selling out, and 89% were home buyers buying in. So that statistic definitely true that there's investors selling out, and the first quarter now being behind us, really no change in the numbers.
And what about the quality of stock? Some are saying that is lower, and as a result, there's a drop in the median price.
Exactly right. Typically, investors typically will own lower value assets, not always, but more typically, your mum and dad investor, for example's sake, they might have a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment for 400,000 or 600,000. So if there's more sales of that nature taking place, then it does drag the medians and the average down. So, you term it as investor grade stock, typically that's sub 1 million, sub 1.5 million, and there's been plenty more transacting in that sector.
Yeah, this article, it was talking about Milsons Point and the unit market there. Some of the units originally sold off the plan to international buyers now facing higher stamp duty costs. They give an example of a unit that was bought for $3.1 million off the plan, resold for $2.55 million. That has got to hurt. The market now shows greater buyer caution. What in that space around the off the plan market, has there been some sort of burn factor for some people?
That, sadly, is not an uncommon story. The example that you just gave then, I could give you plenty of examples. There was one recently that we saw that was a 1-bedroom apartment that was originally bought off the plan for $770,000. They've gone and sold it for $495,000. That's obviously a pretty significant war story, but not uncommon. Sadly, when buying off the plan, often the salespeople will encourage you to compare other apartments within the development rather than other apartments in the rest of the market. And the sad reality is, at the time when that person bought that apartment I'm referencing, no other 1-bedrooms were selling anything like $700,000, but they weren't considering the whole market. They were only looking within that development. And that sometimes is where people get burnt. The new car feeling, if you like, of buying off the plan. The second you drive it out of the showroom, it's worth 10 to 15% less, is the case in some off the plan purchases.
Had you been to Adelaide prior to just upending out of Joburg into Australia?
Craig, when we landed in Adelaide, we knew 2 people. We hadn't before, but it was the right move for us. The situation in South Africa, unfortunately, has been deteriorating. It was time to relocate to greener pastures.
So what made you settle out of any city around Australia? What was it about Adelaide that said, you know what, I think we're going to move there?
It really does offer a lot. It's the perfect balance between a big and small city, if that makes sense. It's often referred to as a big country town. It ticks all the boxes if you relocate in with a family. You're 20 minutes away from the beach. The city's big enough to provide a lot of opportunity, but not that big that you have congested traffic and all the problems that come with a large city. The beautiful hills are only 20 minutes away. Schooling's fantastic. There's a great sense of community here in South Australia. For us, it was a no-brainer, and we're very, very happy that we chose Adelaide.
Mate, you're sounding like a local that's been living there for 30 years.
The accent gives me away. I'm very proud to be here in South Australia and calling it my home.
Now, what about back home? When you said to your friends and family, hey, we're upending and we're going to Adelaide, probably many would say, where's that?
There were a few comments along those lines. In South Africa at the moment, immigration and migration is a constant talking point. So South Africans traditionally have always preferred moving to Australia because we're so aligned in both culturally and in our way of life, I suppose. So people are very familiar with Australia, and most people knew Adelaide.
Oh, that's good to hear. And let's just talk about the migrants, because you were telling me off here the amount of phone calls that you are getting on a daily basis from migrants wanting properties, etc. Tell us what's going on in that space, because you sound incredibly busy.
Absolutely. I get phone calls all day, every day from migrants looking both to rent property and to purchase, and that's ongoing.
Tell us a little bit about what's happening with the interstate investors at the moment, because they're still contacting you, they're still wanting product.
Absolutely, Craig. Still massive demand for interstate investors. Lending rates up 16% now from investors, with roughly 39% of home loans being issued along the investment lines. So the attractive investment opportunity that this beautiful state offers is definitely drawing interstate investors in.
First home young investors. This is also showing up on your radar, where the younger investor is there looking for stock.
That is correct. We recently sold one to a couple in Golden Grove, 24 years of age, purchasing their second investment property. Strong rental yields making this possible. Loads of enthusiasm from young people to get onto the property ladder, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah, that's what you want, is lots of enthusiasm. And before I wrap it up, I should make mention of a 27.3 hectare parcel of land in Gulwa, which is proposed for rezoning to allow mixed-use development with 400 homes, retail and commercial users, and 15% affordable housing. So that is something, I know that's a little bit off the beaten trail where you are, but it's always good to see some of these land holdings open up.
That's correct. And Gulwa is a beautiful part of South Australia, so maybe we can get involved there down the line.
And the interest rate, of course, which was that talking point when we first started, what do you think is going to happen between now and the end of the year? Do you think we're likely to see another cut?
I don't think they'll cut. I think it will be held over.
Don't navigate the real estate market alone. Let us help guide you in the world of real estate every day. Make better informed decisions with the latest news and insights.
Now, while you can get more of a mortgage, and your mortgage broker, you say, has been super helpful, you don't want to overcommit to a larger borrowing scenario, because you say you are on your own, you're in your 40s with no backstop, and it could just take one event to severely cripple you financially, and that's of concern. You ask the question, am I overthinking all of this? Well, I've got to say, every situation is different, Nikki. So my suggestion is make a decision sooner rather than later to save time and money, and also the stress that is going to be weighing you down. I guess you'd have a few comments about Nikki there in Adelaide, just sort of weighing the pros and the cons up.
Yeah, good morning, Craig. Thanks for having me on the show. And certainly if that isn't just an echoing sentiment across all of the nation, I think amongst buyers, especially the first home buyers who are looking to capitalise on these government incentives, we can totally understand that they're searching for properties and they've been looking for potentially 3 or 4 years and just watching the market climb, usually in most cases faster than they're trying to sell, than they're able to save. And so that's where this procrastination can certainly creep in, because the fear that potentially making an incorrect financial decision and not having a backstop, as Nikki explains, can definitely create some reasonable fears. But at the same time, they're watching markets creep up faster than they can save. So I believe the goal of this is to help people get into the market sooner and get in front of that increase and hopefully build some equity and get on that property ladder. And it is difficult for people when they're up against investors or second home buyers who are capitalising on equity. And we've heard stories of investors and seen it ourselves, where those second home buyers or investors who have slightly better leveraging and better financial positions just offer slightly above the government incentive cap, which helps them to grab properties. So my thoughts would echo yours, Craig, that if you can afford to, and if buying a property is very high on your priority list, then jumping in sooner rather than later can be helpful, because then you're getting ahead of that potential growth that we're hearing a lot of economists speak about.
Now, house prices often drop the further you travel from the city along train lines. This is something we want to talk about this morning. Suburbs deeper down the line are usually more affordable due to longer commutes and distance from major employment hubs. PropTrack reported that desirable schools, beaches and lifestyle amenities, they can create exceptions between neighbouring stops. But try this on for size. In Melbourne, buyers can save $1.1 million by choosing Caulfield over nearby Melbourne, or $923,000 by opting for Box Hill instead of Mont Albert. So there's quite a big difference in these neighbourhoods. And if we take a look at Perth, Dan, where you are, Stirling and Warwick have a difference of around $450,000 in their median sale price. So perhaps just step over what's going on with these price variations where you are and what is causing the big price differences in those suburbs.
Yeah, so you're certainly correct in that the further north we go, you do see a trend that, or the further south, you do tend to see a trend as we progress away from the CBD, you see property prices becoming more affordable for buyers. And that is undoubtedly linked to factors like commutes for work and people working in CBDs. However, it's definitely not the only factor which would affect that pricing. And we see public amenities being one key factor. Affordability levels in general can sometimes help different suburbs. And also, I think it's important to note when you're looking at a median sale price to be wary of what the median property is within a suburb, because typically you can see that some suburbs have predominantly apartment style buildings, or you have more unit styles, or simply a higher density of 3x1s even on full size blocks, whereby that would somewhat artificially affect the median sale price. What we do see is exactly as the piece states, that the further north you go, the more affordability you see.
Here's a question too for you. Do you use Temu? You know, you've got the flashing pop-ups, the countdown timers, and these endless free gift offers. They are flooding your screen. Anthony, good morning to you. And you were telling me off air that you haven't experienced Temu, but you have experienced all of those cookies. And, you know, once you visit these websites, they get you.
Yeah, good morning. Great to be here. And it's uncanny. You're searching for something on the website and then suddenly you're getting advertisements in relation to similar products. So sounds like Temu is one for me to absolutely avoid.
Now, Australia's housing market has hit a new landmark. We're going to talk about this morning, with the total value of residential property now estimated at $11.8 trillion. That is according to Cotality. At this pace, they're suggesting that the market is on track to cross the 12 trillion threshold by the end of the year, signalling strong momentum heading into the new year. And for those that are still trying to purchase and potentially buying into this rising market, how are those conversations going, Anthony, with people that you're talking to and their take on the current market heading up to Christmas?
Yeah, it's a challenging environment. And as you touched on, the value of residential real estate in Australia has hit $11.8 trillion. We're not far off that $12 trillion mark. It has grown a staggering $678 billion over the past 12 months. We now have 1 in 3 properties with a median value of over $1 million, and the market is gaining momentum. It's grown 4.8% nationally. The 3 months to September, we saw 2.2% growth. This is the largest growth we've seen in the market for a couple of years now, since May 2024. So the market is gaining momentum. It's creating a lot of challenges for buyers. You've got throngs of bidders at auctions. You've got escalating clearance rates, which are now around about 70% for the last month, and you've got rising prices. So very, very challenging for buyers. Value of Australia's housing market is $11.8 trillion. Superannuation, for example, is sitting at $4.3 trillion. So 55.5% of Australia's wealth is tied up in real estate.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, isn't it? And never a dull moment in the Australian real estate market. We've got those twists and turns like a roller coaster. And if you are a first home buyer navigating what looks like this rising market, how are you traversing the landscape at the moment? Because, Anthony, how should people prepare for what's unfolding?
For some of them, it is a shock. The rising market, the number of people at auction, the discussion with real estate agents. How do you navigate all of this? Some basic fundamentals can help get your framework right. Firstly, know your budget. Understand what you are able to afford. That's based on what your deposit might be. That's based on how much you can borrow. And that'll give you an outcome around this is my purchasing capacity. Also, understand some of the things you might be able to leverage, whether it's a stamp duty concession, whether it's the first home loan guarantee scheme or another state government grant. The property guide or the pricing guide might be $1 million and they go to auction and it goes for 1.5 million, which can be really discerning for a buyer. And it may be you have to broaden your research. You have to maybe go from, look, I can't afford a house. Maybe I'm looking at a townhouse. So really understand the sort of property and area that is going to suit.
Grab your weekly dose of inspiration to help build a real estate portfolio. We talk to the best in the business every day. Learn from the professionals and know your property with us. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.